It is the indifference, it is the inhumanity that is fueling violence. The world should start recomposing the new world order, starting with Palestine, which is the strongest symbol of justice.
Nous vivons aujourd'hui une actualité dramatique.
Since his historic speech at the UN Security Council, declaring France's opposition to the US invasion of Iraq, former French Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin has been an outspoken critic of Western military interventions around the world.
On a Gaza, c'est un véritable scandale sur le plan de la démocratie. Et tout cela au nom de quoi? Au nom de la guerre. Ah, c'est la guerre, c'est comme ça.
My name is Fatima Bhutto, and in this special interview for Studio B, I'll be talking to Dominique de Villepin about the war on Gaza and why he believes the international community has failed to act. Thank you, Dominique de Villepin. You are the most high-profile Western politician, a former foreign minister and prime minister of France, to have spoken out on the war on Gaza, which you called the greatest historical scandal. Very simply, what compelled you to add your voice to this issue?
Well, there are many personal reasons. I was born in Morocco. My family lived in Algeria. I went through decolonization. I was raised in South America, lived in the US, in India, and traveled extensively around the world. And I really could not stand looking at such a suffering, such a waste in the Middle East. During the 7th of October, a tragedy for Israel, and every day since for Gaza, now Lebanon, and who knows elsewhere. And I keep asking myself, where is it going to end? And it is true that at first you can convince yourself that Israel had many reasons to restore deterrence, many reasons to secure its own population. We can understand that. But why destroying the whole Gaza? Why killing children, women? Why this determination to destroy schools, universities, even cemeteries? The whole identity of the Palestinian people. And that's where you understand that you are in front of an escalation that nobody does control. And I cannot accept the fact that the world leadership, neither in the Arab world, neither in Europe, neither in the US or elsewhere, can stand still and not do anything. We know that the war on terror should not be fought through only force. We need political objective. We need hope at the end of the day. And there is no hope until today.
We know that the destruction has been total. According to the UN, Israel has killed more 5 to 9-year-olds than any other age group in Gaza. It's been an attack on doctors, on journalists. What do you think Israel's military and political objectives are in this case?
I think the common justification of Israel is both security and retaliation towards a terrorist movement, which is Hamas. I think anybody looking at what's going on in Gaza sees a huge disproportion between the retaliation and the threat. Even the former Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, says that Israel has reached its objectives in Gaza. So why the war is continuing? Is it because Benjamin Netanyahu wants to make a gift to Donald Trump as a new president and wait a couple of months more and not give this gift to Joe Biden? Is it because there is some kind of a hidden agenda pursuing the destruction of Gaza and the possible colonization of Gaza or the displacement of the population. And that's why I want to remind every leader of the world. International law is for everybody. Even for the most developed country, there should not be double standards. We should not forget that at the core source of all this violence, there is something that happened in this region, which is the whole population of Palestine having to leave their homes. I remember my friend Mahmoud Darwish, the poet, telling me his feeling when he has and his family to leave everything, 700,000 people leaving their homes with no possibility of going back. This feeling, the Nakba, the catastrophe, is very much in the mind of the Palestinian, as much as for the Israelis, the Shoah, the pogroms of the end of the 19th century is still very present. These trauma are here, but this injustice is today on our shoulders. There will be no peace. There will be no security in this region until we can erase this injustice and recognize a Palestinian state. And this, everybody has to understand it. Donald Trump, as much as the European leaders, as much as the Arab leaders, some people think that in the hidden agenda of some of these countries, they are happy to see the liquidation of terrorist organizations. Yes, but nobody would be able to liquidate, to erase the Palestinian requirement for justice.
In your speech at the United Nations Security Council in 2003 against the Iraq War, you warned then that the credibility of the West was at stake. Is Prime Minister Netanyahu picking up where the US left off after 9/11?
I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is very much using geopolitics to his own personal benefit. He has very much in mind the idea that for Israel it would be a lot easier if it could legitimate what the current Israeli government is doing every day in putting forward the risk of a clash of civilizations. Of course, if you say there is a risk of civilization and Israel is at the forefront, Israel is fighting, as Benjamin Netanyahu says,
and
fighting for Europe.
Herzog as
yes,
well.
Fighting for the US to defend civilization. But how can you defend civilization not respecting humanitarian law, not respecting human lives, not respecting the necessity of justice? Civilization is two things. It's an inheritance of culture. It's an inheritance of duties. But it's also the ability to take the lessons from history. And the lessons that we should take from the last 25 years, since 9/11, the war on Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the war in Libya, and so on, is that there is no way you can erase terror just by force. You need a political perspective. And I'm still waiting every day for somebody to stand up in Israel and say, okay, we have obtained what we wanted. We have erased the Hamas. We have dismantled the Hezbollah. Now, let's give a perspective to the Palestinian people. Let's make sure that Lebanon will be able to reconstruct. Let's give hope to these people. You see, the best proof of madness of this region is that, as today, so little empathy in Israel for what's going on in Gaza. And on the side of the Arabs, so little empathy for what happened on the 7th of October. Empathy is the precondition for humanity.
But in this case, who can step in to play a role? Because we've seen the West either reluctant or simply unwilling, unprepared to step in to exert any pressure on Israel. In the case of the US, now with President-elect Trump's arrival, and with his cabinet and his advisors who are even more overt in their support for the occupation, where are we going to see solutions come from?
We are in a moment very important for the world, because the world is broken and every day more divided. Divided between the West on the defensive and emerging countries. We've seen that in the summit of Kazan with Russia, China, the BRICS, which are organizing themselves in a more and more polarized world. So we are at a turning point. And that's where Donald Trump comes. And Donald Trump is a man totally unpredictable. This brings both a liability, a responsibility, but also an opportunity. The opportunity is that we know for sure that Donald Trump wants to put back on the agenda the Abraham Accord. He wants to look at the region on a transactional way. Economic, technology, betting on the strong countries, Israel, Saudi Arabia, trying to solve the Iranian matter. So the question now, in the next 2 months, is a window of opportunity for the region, as well as for Europe, to get together, united, and to send two messages. Mm-hmm. The first one, we are united, and there is no way we are going to accept any deal unless we go for a Palestinian state. Saudi Arabia now is in a position of leadership in this region. Strategic leadership, political leadership, religious leadership. So there is a position of Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is at the center of the agenda of both Israel and the US. They are betting on Saudi Arabia to create an axis of stability, and Saudi Arabia accepting the Abraham Accord. And of course for Europe, which has fought for many, many decades for the two-state solution, it is a fantastic opportunity to put their weight to support the Arab countries.
But do you think that the Palestinian people, because they are largely absent in this process so far, do you think the Palestinian people have any faith in Saudi Arabia as a negotiator for peace?
I think that it is a process. We should create the possibility of a new governance for the Palestinians. We should create a process for a new governance in Gaza. We should have a clear perspective of unifying Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So it is a process of responsibility. We know that the Arab countries are ready, with the support of the UN, to create an interposition force. We know that they are ready to participate to the next administration of Gaza. But we know at the same time that Israel is preparing everything in Gaza to take over the control of the region. The Nectarim corridor, the Philadelphia corridor, a buffer zone around Gaza. At one point, we should say stop to Israel.
And so why doesn't Europe tell them to stop? 13, 14 months in, why hasn't a single European country done that?
I think the European should get united. They will have to do so just to defend their own economic situation. They should do it on the basis of justice. And we have another reason to support such a strategy. The fact that the world order of 1945, the world order of 1991 is dying because it is an unfair order. It is criticized by all the BRICS, by all the emerging countries, by all the poor countries of Africa, South America. It's time to recreate a new order. And my profound belief is that the world should start recomposing the new world order, starting with Palestine, which is the best and strongest symbol of justice.
So what could France, for example, do in concrete measures that they haven't done so far? Because we've heard some pushback from countries like Spain, for example, but in terms of actual steps, what can we do?
One thing that the European could do would be collectively to launch the movement of recognition of Palestine as a state. President Macron said, we favor such a movement, but it is not the right moment. But I'm asking, what is the right moment? I think it is an incredibly important move. Why? Because we see the despair in the region. And my profound belief is that if we don't do nothing, then at the end of the day, we will see terrorist movement taking the advantage, using the revolt, using the anger of the region to relaunch new attacks. I think we should put at the starting point the creation of Palestine as a nation state, just to show the Palestinians that we are serious, we are committed, and then do the real and difficult work.
So when you talk of a Palestinian state, are we talking about a state that would be on 22% of what was historic Palestine?
I think that if you are a young Palestinian, the question is not so much the size. You see, ideology has been dominating the region for decades, since 1948. At one point, if you are a Palestinian, what do you want? You want a future. You want a home. You want the possibility of having a sovereign country. This is what you want, very concrete things. So of course, the Hamas will say, no, we don't want that.
And Israel, presumably.
And of course, Israel. And the Hamas and other terrorist organizations would say, no, what we want is to eradicate Israel. That's ideology. And one of the biggest dangers for the region is that what used to be a political issue, the question of Palestine, is today more and more a religious issue. And we know that when those issues are put on a religious basis, there is no end. No end to hate, no end to violence. So we should be careful in entering in the deep subject of creating a future for the Palestinians and the possibility also for all the Arab world, which is very important, to try to begin to work together. The unity of the region, the solidarity in the region, the economic perspective. It is one of the richest regions in the world. And you have failed countries, poor people, a strong division between rich and poor. All this could be solved through a Middle East regional agreement. You could launch a new future for the region, starting with the principle of justice. And why Benjamin Netanyahu is putting so much energy in what he's doing? Of course, to save his own life, but also because he wants to eradicate, to erase the Palestinian question in order to realize what the maximalists in his government, the messianic people in his government, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, want, which is a great Israel.
Gaza is the graveyard of more than just Gaza. It is the graveyard of international law, of the functioning of the UN. So if Israel has gotten away with this disproportional violence, what can the West do to Israel to make them accept even the idea of a Palestinian state?
I think that diplomacy is a way to use the balance of forces in order to create new opportunities. If the Arab Muslim countries of the region get united, if they work together with the Europeans to show to the United States that there is a red line, we should remember in 2018, Donald Trump advocated the transfer of the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He defended in 2020 the Abraham's Accord. He supported a peace plan with no perspective for the Palestinians. So he's capable to pressure Israel in a way Joe Biden was not able to do. He wants to put his marks in history. So he's transactional. If we put as a red line the necessity of the creation of a Palestinian state, if Saudi Arabia accepts to stand for this idea, then everything would be possible.
In an interview with The Atlantic, though, which was denied later on by Saudi authorities, MBS was reported to have said that he personally didn't care for the Palestinian issue, that his people did, but not him. Saudi Arabia later denied that. Isn't it very risky to put the fate of Palestine in the hands of Donald Trump?
There is no blank check here. There is the fact that we know for sure if we are not going to take the opportunity to create the Palestinian state today, situation will get worse in the region tomorrow. You see, when you try to put into perspective the capabilities of this region in terms of disruption, we should remember in 1973, the same countries, they decided to use oil and gas for embargo. They could decide to disrupt all the maritime corridors of the region and to disrupt international trade. They have the capacity for all the leaders of the region, even Northern Africa, Algeria, South Africa, who had been fighting in the International Court of Justice. All these countries, they have in their hand a historical responsibility. And if they don't take this responsibility, things will get worse. We had the 7th of October. Who knows what we will have tomorrow? And we know that not doing anything is going to fuel violence, to reinforce Hamas, to reinforce Hezbollah, to reinforce all these terrorist organizations. It is the indifference, it is the inhumanity that is fueling violence. And that doesn't mean that we should forget the situation in Sudan, the situation in Ethiopia, the situation in Congo, the situation in Ukraine. But a new world needs to start. A new world order needs to start through action. And action can start tomorrow in Gaza and in Palestine.
Dominique de Villepin, you're a politician and a diplomat with over 4 decades of experience, and you recently said that the irony of history is that sometimes when we are at the bottom of the abyss, something happens that can allow hope. It certainly feels in many ways that we are at this bottom already. What exactly do you feel we must be hopeful about going forward?
Well, I think there's something very basic that we need to do every day. Just look at those little children of Gaza. What future will they get? Think about those little children in the northern part of Israel or in the southern part of Lebanon. What future? Bombs, more bombs, violence, death. Is this the future we wish for these people? And to end up this vicious circle of violence, we need to restart everything. And the world is going to fall apart. Globalization is going to fall apart. You see, all the people looking for getting richer, that's fine, but they won't get any richer if our world is going to be divided. In one part, the rich countries of the West, another part, the countries of the global South, with such a resentment that every day we will feel, even inside our countries and in the rest of the world, this danger as a threat to security and stability. And you see, there's something diplomats know well, which is the ruse of history. The last very important ruse of history has been Russia and China getting together. Nobody had thought before that this was possible. So why tomorrow cannot we dream to have Saudi Arabia and Iran getting along one another and creating a new balance of forces in the region? Every time I go to the Middle East, I look to these people for decades, for centuries, they've been waiting for something to happen. And I see people getting richer in those countries, in the Gulf states, and I see the gap in between the people and the elites. This is not acceptable. This is a huge risk for the region. So, humanity, justice, realism, pragmatism, this should be on the agenda for all of us.
Well, here's to a future of justice and peace. Thank you, Dominique de Villepin.
Thank you so much, Fatima.